Hey everybody, Stan Efferding here, founder of the Vertical Diet. I'm back with a short video. I want to talk about whether stretching is good or bad. Whoa, whoa. I was at a seminar recently and I had a power lifter, had a back injury, asked me if he should be doing yoga to fix his back injury. And I blurted out that he shouldn't. That I didn't think that was a good idea to be stretching and bending the spine when he was trying to recover from a back injury. As luck would have it, in a seminar full of many people, there was a yoga practitioner there that was less than agreeable with my indictment of yoga. But that having been said, it wasn't an indictment altogether. It was a specific recommendation for that individual presenting with his injury. As yoga goes, it can be good or bad. As stretching in general goes, it can be good or bad. On this continuum here, you've got stiffness, and that would be your power lifter and your strongman and your bodybuilder typically. Also your sprinter, your basketball player, people who have explosive, powerful types of demands for their sport. On the other end of the spectrum here, you might have a gymnast who has to be very flexible, or a ballerina would also have to be very flexible. And either end of that spectrum can expose people to an increased risk of injury. The graph here shows that as flexibility increases, so does injury. And as flexibility decreases, so does injury. And the people with very little flexibility should probably stretch more. And the people with lots and lots of flexibility should probably lift more to reduce their exposure to injury. That range of motion is really dependent upon their sport. And if you have enough range of motion as a power lifter to successfully complete your lifts, then that's probably adequate for performance. So let's talk about stretching in general, what it's good for and what it's bad for according to the research. So here's a whole bunch of different things that you could apply stretching to and whether or not it's good or bad. One is increasing range of motion. It's obviously an excellent way to use stretching. You want to warm up first if you're going to increase range of motion, because you're not just stretching muscles, you're stretching nerves and vascular tissue as well. Generally, it's recommended to stretch after training, and probably within a short window after training. And the best recommendation now is just to perform a few sets of 30-second holds, maybe 2 to 3 times a week at a minimum, to be able to maintain that flexibility. People who need to be more flexible might stretch more often. What stretching has not been proven to be good for is injury prevention before a sporting event. We used to do this. When I was in exercise science studies at the University of Oregon and I was a high school soccer coach, we encouraged people to stretch right before their games and their events and their practices. And as it turns out, that has not proven to be beneficial for injury prevention. Having adequate range of motion is, but stretching immediately before an event is not beneficial. Now, getting some sort of dynamic warm-up is, so you want to specifically utilize the kind of movements that you'll be using in your sport. Now, in terms of injury rehabilitation, the stretching of the spine in particular that I mentioned is probably counterproductive. It increases the stretch reflex, which decreases sensitivity, and it can aggravate the discs of the spine. And so until such time that spine starts to heal, you probably shouldn't apply a stretching load to it. And the frequency and the volume really is what matters in terms of injury recovery. Just getting a lot of blood into the area, but not overbending or stretching that area. In terms of recovery from workout, it has not been proven to provide a significant benefit over just some sort of active recovery. The benefits there are going to get derived from better sleep, better nutrition, and better hydration. But stretching does not seem to provide any better benefit for recovery from training than just some sort of active recovery, just movement and compliance with your sleep, nutrition, and hydration. Now, with respect to performance, does stretching improve performance? And this has been researched, and in this study here, which was done by the Journal of Strength and Conditioning, they actually had athletes stretch before their event, and it decreased force production, decreased speed, and decreased reaction time. So stretching immediately before an event, particularly a power event such as sprinting or basketball or something that requires a stretch reflex, performance declined, both in terms of strength and speed. And so I wouldn't recommend stretching before exercise. That's why we recommend stretching after. Now, it is interesting, there is some research to suggest that stretching can be good for increasing muscle mass, of all things. I never really thought about this much throughout my career until I trained with Flex Wheeler 10 years ago. And he had us stretching in between every set. If we were working our chest, he would make us stretch the chest. If we were doing leg presses or squats, he would make us squat down and hold that position between sets. And that seemed to be one of the most successful periods of training that I've ever been through in all of my bodybuilding career. And as it turns out, there is some research, and this is a book that's online, it's on Kindle by Chris Beardsley, called Hypertrophy. And in there, he talks about how both an active and a passive stretch can stimulate hypertrophy. And I've noticed this whenever John Meadows presented his program. He also talks about utilizing a stretch for the muscles to increase hypertrophy. It seems that it does create less fatigue, it provides a different stimulus, and the combination of those two stimuli together improves muscle hypertrophy. So it's not whether or not stretching is good or bad, it's what you use it for and whether or not it gives you the benefit that's intended. So that's it for stretching. I think that these folks here that are hyperflexible should definitely lift more, especially axial loading, because it's going to increase bone mineral density, which you don't get simply from stretching alone or yoga. And of course, the rest of the meat necks like myself, it wouldn't hurt us to do a little bit of stretching to make sure that we don't expose ourselves to increased injury. There have been a couple times throughout my career where I had been less flexible and I pulled a muscle trying to reach depth in the squat. I was actually shooting for that to try and be as stiff as possible so I could take advantage of that stretch reflex at the bottom of the squat. When I would warm up for the bench, I would usually use a one board so I wouldn't get the full stretch on my chest until I got to the platform on my opener. And when I finally touched the chest, I had that immediate stretch reflex, that snap back, which made it more explosive. So I utilize that to my advantage, and sometimes you can go overboard on that, as some folks can do with over stretching, which can expose their spine to injury potentially. So it's not necessarily good or bad, it's how you use it. So that's my stretching video, and this information and much more, and the research is always on stanefferding.com. In the vertical diet, it's 250 pages, over 200 references to articles and videos, and peer-reviewed published research. See you again next time. Whoa.